Chapter 29. The Forever Sign. The queen walked to the window and looked out toward Roland's Hill. Ronduin joined her, and together they watched a cow walking slowly across the hillside. "She's far away, so I can't tell for sure, but from the way she moves, I'm guessing that cow will soon birth a calf," said the queen. "Now she's lying down," said Ronduin. "Some cows rest often when they are near their birthing time," said the queen, reaching into her pockets and pulling out a handful of silky cloth. "Now," she said, "you'll have to go to the sitting room soon to watch for smoke from Ricard's house. So let's start your lesson." Ronduin watched as his mother pulled apart the small bundle of cloth and revealed 3 large squares of lightweight silk material. 2 were red and 1 was blue. "The first step is to learn to juggle these squares of silk," she said. "Not juggling balls?" "Not yet," said his mother. She tossed a red square into the air and let it drift slowly to her feet. Ronduin picked it up and threw the red silk up and watched it float and land on the stone floor. "Juggling balls move very fast," said the queen. "When we juggle with silk, everything moves more slowly because silk floats on the air, and we get more time to learn. When I was little, I tried juggling with Uncle Cedric's juggling balls. I practiced all of one winter while he was away. I hoped I would learn before he returned the next spring, but when I next saw Uncle Cedric, I was still mostly dropping the juggling balls on the floor and picking them up again. Then he showed me how to juggle slowly with big floating squares of silk. When I went back to using the juggling balls, I found I was much more skillful than I had been. After that, I learned quickly. First, we'll practice the basic pattern," said Ronduin's mother. She walked over to the window where a layer of dust had formed on the windowsill. She traced her finger through the dust. "This is a forever sign," she said, as she kept running her finger around and around in a pattern that looked like a figure 8 on its side. Now Ronduin traced his finger around the forever sign that she had made. The smooth stone windowsill felt cold to the touch, but it warmed as his finger moved through the sideways 8 again and again. There was something about this shape that made him want to continue, to go around and around and around. Ronduin's mother was patient, and she waited until he stopped tracing the forever shape. "Now," she said, "you know this shape well. Our next step is to learn how to make a shape like this that moves in the air in front of our bodies with a piece of silk. Here, Ronduin, you take this red square and I'll use a blue square." She put the remaining red square in her pocket. The queen began tossing and catching the blue silk in the shape of the forever sign. "You make the forever sign in front of your body with the X right in the middle," she said. "It looks like this," she said as she demonstrated taking the scarf across her body with her right hand and throwing it upward so it rose higher than her left shoulder. She waited until it floated down to her left hand. Then she caught it and tossed it from her middle over toward her right ear. "I'll keep doing this," she said, "while you try the same pattern with your red square." Ronduin held the scarf near his middle and then tossed it with his right hand upward toward his left ear. It flew higher than he expected, and he reached up to catch it with his left hand. He paused, and his mother said, "Try to toss it without pausing as soon as it's in your hand, and when it goes high, try to let it float down to your hand instead of reaching up." Ronduin practiced for some time. He could see the forever shape in the rising and falling of the piece of silk. The feeling he had when making the forever shape on the windowsill came back to him. It was like he was caught up in something that would not let him go. He started to think about this, about how he had been pulled into a mysterious, unstoppable pattern. He wondered how such a thing could happen. Then, unexpectedly, the red silk fell to the floor. "I think it's time for you to look for smoke from the sitting room," said his mother. "And I'm supposed to meet your father in the kitchen before we carry water. I think, in general, we should avoid practicing in the sitting room because your father goes in there quite often. But I know we'll be busy, so feel free to practice while you look out the window for smoke." "So we won't practice with 3 squares today?" asked Ronduin. "Becoming an expert with only 1 piece of silk is the first step," said the Queen. "In the long run, you'll be glad you took the time to perfect this." Chapter 30. What goes up must come down. Ronduin looked out the window of the sitting room across the flooded fields toward the forest, toward Mirabel's house, which was hidden behind the trees. He looked at the sky over the forest for billowing smoke from a big fire, but he saw no smoke, not even a thin line of smoke from a chimney. Then Ronduin gazed at the reflections of little puffy clouds in the water. He spotted the tops of bushes poking out of the water along the still hidden road through the fields. Ronduin sighed, and then he smiled. It had been many weeks since he first gazed out this window into a world of rain and more rain and floodwaters that rose even after the rain had stopped. He remembered watching for Sir Andrew and the green boat, and he remembered waving farewell to a boatload of villagers as they made their way home. 2 ducks swooped into view and landed near the window. "You won't be able to paddle about near the castle much longer," said Ronduin to the ducks. "The water is going down." Now Ronduin turned his back to the window. He saw the high shelf with the big book his father had read at the big table. He noticed the painting of King Ronduin, his mother's sewing chest, and the hearth where he had so often fed the fire. Today, no fire brightened the hearth. Instead, a pile of ashes cushioned a cold, blackened log. Ronduin took Apple out of his pocket and placed it on the small table that had once held a small flood made of cider. "I'm sorry you don't get to juggle yet," said Ronduin to Apple. "But you will juggle soon, and you will love it. You get to fly through the air in the forever sign. I will make 2 new friends for you, a yellow throwing sack named Pear and a purple one named Plum. But now you can watch me make the forever sign with this red silk. Watch closely so you will learn how to do it." Ronduin pulled the piece of red silk from his pocket. Using his right hand, he flung it up by his left ear, allowed it to float down to his left hand, grabbed it, and tossed it near his right ear. After catching the floating fabric with his right hand, he began again. As Ronduin practiced, he learned just how hard to throw. He learned that he should not be too quick or too slow to grab the floating, falling silk from the air. At the same time, he found that waiting too long messed up his steady rhythm. He practiced for a long time. Then he remembered he was supposed to watch for smoke. He laid the piece of silk on the table next to Apple and walked up to the window. He was relieved to see that the sky was still clear. "I think I should face the window while I juggle," he said to Apple. "That way, if smoke appears, I'll see it right away." Ronduin lifted the red silk and began again. This time he looked out the window while he was juggling. He could see the silk, but at the same time, in the distance, he could see the forest that surrounded Mirabelle's home. He kept his gaze steady, and he spoke these words over and over. Toss, float, catch, toss, float, catch. Then suddenly new words with the same rhythm popped into his head, and he found himself saying, peas, porridge, hot, peas, porridge, cold, peas, porridge, in the pot, 9 days old. He had to say the words in the pot really fast, as if they were one word, to make the rhythm work. Peas, porridge, hot, peas, porridge, cold, peas, porridge, in a pot, 9 days old. Ronduin made the forever sign with the piece of red silk as he said these words out loud. He felt himself pulled into a feeling of forever, like he could go on forever, smoothly, effortlessly. He had mastered a new skill, but he didn't stop to think about his achievement. He just kept tossing, allowing the silk to float and catching it, and tossing it again. While he did this, he watched for any wisp of smoke rising above the trees. This is the last day we will send jugs of water to town, thought Mirabelle as she tugged at the rope to raise a bucket of water. After the boat leaves for the foothills, I will have to draw water for only Mother and Adelaide and baby Elspeth and Rowan and me. Father and Sir Andrew will row the green boat to the foothills, and the baker and his family will return to town. It will be so quiet here. Maybe it will be so quiet in the morning that I can run around the house. The bucket reached the top of the well, where Mirabelle let it rest on the stone edge. She watched her brother Rowan splitting logs while she rested her arms. I imagine his arms get tired too, she thought. Mirabelle poured the water from the bucket into the last of the jugs she had to fill. Rowan stopped and used his sleeve to wipe the sweat from his forehead. He saw Mirabelle looking toward him and called out, Hey, Mirabelle, can you come here for a minute? If you can do some of the wood splitting, then I can carry this pile of split wood to the goat yard where we will build the big signal fire. Mirabelle walked over to Rowan, who handed her the axe. I think you could do this, he said. You're strong. Of course I could do it, said Mirabelle. But I told Mother I would dig about in the garden and pull the weeds so the soil is ready for planting. I told her I would do that as soon as I filled all the jugs. Mirabelle heard herself saying these words, yet at the same time she felt curious. She had never split wood before. What would it feel like to lift the axe, to swing it overhead, to bring it flying down, to crack open a log in one swoop? I'll try it, she said. First, take a practice swing, said Rowan. Don't hit the wood hard, just tap it. Do this to be sure you have a safe swing that won't keep going and hit you in your leg. Rowan handed Mirabelle the axe. She looked at the log Rowan had placed upright on the big stump that was always used as a base for splitting wood. She realized right away that the whole setup was too tall for her. She didn't let that stop her. She took the log off of the stump and stood on the ground next to the stump. You know how to do this? Asked Rowan. Of course I do, replied Mirabelle. I've been watching Father and Mother split wood since I was as small as Elspeth. Mirabelle knew how to grasp the axe at both ends of the wooden shaft. This will be my practice swing, she said. Mirabelle held the axe over her shoulder, raising it very slowly, and she moved it high into the air as she lowered the sharp edge cautiously with great care. She slid both hands to the end far from the blade. She had seen her mother, her father, and Rowan slide both hands together. Now she was surprised to feel that, with her heavy hands away from the blade, the sharp end felt heavier. The axe fell faster than she expected. "When you make your real swing, use your wrists to twist the blade just before so it hits the wood," said Rowan, showing her what he meant with his hands. One hand was flat, and the hand showed the motion of the axe striking an angle. Mirabelle nodded and looked determined. She raised the axe over her shoulder with her hands apart, then brought them together at the end, farther from the blade as she put speed and force into her swing. The axe blade hit the log near the edge. It split the wood, but not all the way through. Mirabelle remembered seeing this happen, and she knew what to do. She pulled the axe out, and with a swift, short chop, drove it back into the opening. This time, the smaller piece split away from the main piece. Mirabelle smiled. Rowan smiled too. "Now that you can split wood," said Rowan, "perhaps Father and Mother will let me go to the foothills in the green boat. I'm old enough to help plant the fields. If Mother and Father think you can do all of my jobs, then they will be more than likely to let me go." Chapter 31. Listening in the Dark. Mirabelle reached for a rung just above her head. It was her favorite rung on the ladder to the loft. More curved than most, it had once been a branch of an oak tree. Two rounded bumps, one on each side, were the remains of side branches that had been mostly cut away. Now, as Mirabelle used the bumpy rung to pull herself upward, she felt a heaviness in her arms that reminded her that she had spent most of the day hauling water, chopping wood, and carrying armloads of sticks to the pile in the goat yard. This pile would soon be lit as a signal fire, but not tonight. Mirabelle's eyes were already closing as she settled between Adelaide and the half wall made of wattle. She pushed some pokey straw out of her face, gently wrapped her arm around her sleeping sister, and felt herself drifting into a dream. In the dream, she climbed her favorite tree, the oak tree in the front of the house where, from the very topmost branches, she could see all the way to the castle. She saw the fields covered in water, and then the barn hill rising up to the right of the castle. She could not see the barn itself, for it was hidden by the tall pine forest. She could, however, see the stable peeking out from the forest on the lower level of the hill. Mirabelle drifted out of her dream into a deeper sleep. She did not know how long she had slept when she was wakened by the howl of the wind. "We can't light the fire tomorrow if this wind keeps up," said her father. Mirabelle rolled away from Adelaide and peeked through the wattle at the edge of the loft. A single candle lit the faces of the adults around the table. Her mother, her father, Sir Andrew, the baker, and the mother of the twins, who held one of them sleeping in her arms. "I think we have at most 3 days, maybe 4, before the water is too low to travel by boat," said Sir Andrew. "If the water is low, the boat could travel over the lake and then up the river," said Mirabelle's mother. "But the water must still be deep enough over the path to reach the lake," said the mother of the twins. "We will be ready to go home in the morning," said the baker. "With the water dropping, we can move into our upstairs rooms so we can be ready to clean the first floor and the bakery as soon as the water is gone. I'm sorry I can't go with you to help plant the fields in the foothills. I can't even send Garrick. I need him at the bakery to help wash off the mud carried in by the flood." "We have enough workers to fill the boat," said Sir Andrew. "We're leaving space in the boat for 1 runner, maybe 2. if they are small. Once our fire is lit, I'll send the children up the tall oak to watch for Roland's answering fire. If he doesn't light his fire, after the castle relays the message that our fire is lit, that means he needs help. If we learn that he does need help, we need to bring someone with us who can run the foothill path and then run the high path to the barn. Why might he need help? Asked the mother of the twins. When I took the boat to the barn hill to visit Roland, he and I talked about what would happen if the flood stays so long that we can't plant the fields by the castle. He said that if we have to wait that long, the barn hill will be overgrazed and the hay and grain in the barn will be low. The animals will need to move to the new grass, growing up on the foothills. Roland thought he might need help because he might have animals giving birth or a sick animal. With a helper, Roland could stay at the barn and the helper could herd the animals to the foothills and fresh grass. What does it mean if he does light his signal fire? Asked Mirabelle's mother. It means he's ready to herd the cows and the sheep and doesn't need help. In that case, he will meet us in the foothills and leave the large animals with us and go back to care for the chickens. If we see his signal fire, it means we can leave the runner here and, instead, take another field worker with us. Garrick and I will take care of lighting and tending the second signal fire at the end of the village, said the baker. Once the boat is loaded with workers, you will be free to leave for the foothills. Now we must sleep, said Mirabelle's mother. Tomorrow will be a busy day. Mirabelle lay awake in the darkness, while she heard the scufflings of people moving away from the table and towards sleep. Her mind traveled to a day when she had been not much older than Adelaide. She remembered walking with her father across the fields all the way to the barn hill. They had climbed the hill to the big stone barn where Roland had met them and led them to a stall. Here, 5 kittens chased each other. One kitten had stopped and looked up at her. She was a mix of colors, with a dark back, orange markings, and a white breast. She seemed to be saying, "Pick me." Mirabelle fell asleep, remembering the joy of carrying her new kitten all the way home.